Okay, thanks. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
I want to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people whose land I'm on. And I'm delighted that some of my Kaytetye friends are zooming in and teachers, and I want to thank them for allowing me to work on their language. And I'm going to be talking about Kaytetye today. And I'll just point out that I'm going to avoid the Kaytetye word for moon out of respect for my friends online. So I want to talk about three aspects of Jane's huge career, very diverse career, that I'm going to touch on today. One of these is dictionaries, dictionary making, and another one is bringing Western scientific knowledge and Indigenous knowledge of the natural world together. And the third thing that my presentation touches on that is a key theme in Jane's work is language education. So I think I'll just get right into that. There are some moments in fieldwork when an utterance just doesn't make sense, despite knowing all the words. And much later, there can be a moment of understanding. Sometimes it's based on learning something about the culture, but sometimes it's just learning something about the real world that you didn't know. And that's the sort of example I'm going to be talking about today. So in Kaytetye, you can say that the moon travels east, and I'm really pleased to say that Philip, my Kaytetye brothers, also joined us online, who has done a huge amount of translation work with me. So welcome. So one of Jane's really important works that possibly many of you don't know is her chapter in this book, Windows on Meteorology, her chapter, her 1997 chapter, Perceptions of Meteorology in Some Australian Languages. And really, this has been something that I've tried to expand upon in this talk, because there's a lot of overlap here in Jane's article about how the Warramungu worldview and elements of religion and observations of the natural world combine to form understandings of the natural world. And this is something that I'll be talking about today. It's a sort of a neighbouring domain, ethno-astronomy. And of course, I'm talking about a neighbouring language, so Kaytetye, Philip and Valentine's language. And that's just to the south of Warramungu, which is where Jane has done so much fieldwork, as well as Walpurgis. So the example of my not understanding occurred when doing fieldwork to create the Kaytetye Picture Dictionary, which was the second in the IAD Picture Dictionary series. And one thing about this series, the way it was, the dictionaries were came into being, is that they started with a picture and then elicited words rather than the other way around. So this is really to ensure that speakers of languages find the image as insightful. So here's the scene. This is back in 2002, back at Neutral Junction School, and I had a folder of some over 100 black and white drawings that we all considered. So in this photo, got sisters Hilda and Lena and their daughters, Rachel and Kayleen. And so from these drawings, we discussed that they'd come up with the head word, which the drawing would illustrate, and then gave a description which recorded on the ancient mini disc you can see there. So this is the drawing that prompted the utterances that I'm going to talk about today. Some of you may recognise this from Central Australia, because there was a series of these picture vocabularies, and the drawings were used throughout them, including Warramungu, I think. So this is the sentence, after seeing that drawing, that Hilda came up with. Okay, I will read the Kaytetye and you can follow the English. Kulyari narvarko waitari. Narvarkali lilpi lilk. Today apakapan. Narvat nielpi al demal kadam. And in particular, the final sentence, which came a bit later, but I've put in here, be full moonari. It will travel eastwards and become a full moon. So I was pretty confused by this stage, my understanding of how the moon traveled. So I asked Hilda if she actually meant traveling west, but they all sort of looked at me confused and said, no, it's traveling east. So I asked around a bit, and sorry, that's she later explained. Obviously, we had 200 pictures to get through, so I just put that in the too hard basket at the time, and we did get through all the pictures, and we did eventually get the picture dictionary out. So, but much later, I decided to explore this with Hilda in a bit more detail, and you can see in this example here, she expands on it, and the moon, how it returns in the west. Okay, so I'm now going to go into what I've learned from discussions with astronomers and people like David Nash, who've been really helpful. So what the average urban dweller might not realize is that the moon appears slightly further in the east each day, in fact, about 12 degrees above the horizon. And you can see this in respect to the stars, which have a fixed position in the sky. So essentially the moon's orbit carries it eastwards in the Earth's sky. So let's look at this through a picture, some diagrams, so to try and make this clearer. Okay, so here's the position of the moon in the night sky as seen from Earth in the southern hemisphere. That's really important, over the course of its 28-day cycle. Now, we can't see the moon throughout the 28 days at nighttime at the same time each day. So we've got to do this over two diagrams, the sort of the PM diagram, moon at sunset, and then the AM diagram, moon at sunrise. So in the moon at sunset, right on sunset, you can see it's on the first day, you'll see it just as a tiny crescent in the west, and then the next day it's a little bit higher at exactly the same time, and the next day it's a little bit higher, and the next day it's a bit higher, etc., until after 14 days when it appears actually in the east. And then on day 15, we're now going to the AM, so before sunrise. It'll appear at that time in the west, and again a little bit further in the sky, a little bit further east, till at the end of its cycle we see it at sunrise as a crescent, but this time in the west. So yes, over the moon does travel east, and that's in its lunar cycle. But in the day cycle, the 24-hour cycle, of course, it travels east to west. So what's particularly interesting is why Kaytetye people might have referred, in this instance, to the lunar cycle. So that's the drawing that Hilda saw when we did the picture dictionary, and you can see that it matches that the waning crescent moon in the west, so just before the end of its cycle. And to remind you of what Hilda said after being prompted with that diagram, she's talking specifically about that stage of the lunar cycle. When the moon becomes small, it's waiting for the sun. Then the sun will steal it. It will be absent for a couple of days, and then it will return in the west. So we now, I mean, with these diagrams, can make much more sense of what she's talking about there. So I'm going to talk about some other things to do with the moon, but I want to just, actually, before I go back to that, I'll stay here and want to point out that the ethno-astronomer Philip Clark has drawn on some early work by Matthews, who cites an example from New South Wales where a boomerang held up indicates a 2-week period, and depending on the orientation of the round side of the boomerang, the convex side, to either west or east, it's either waxing or waning. So I think this stuff is really important to Kaytetye ways and Indigenous ways of talking about celestial bodies. So in contrast, you know, I've been brought up in urban environment, and while Indigenous people have slept under the stars till quite recently, and as many ethno-astronomers have observed, Indigenous people have a far richer and deeper knowledge of the sky than is usually appreciated. And in a recent book by Noon and Dean Napoli, they've actually gone into this in quite some detail in their 2022 book. One question that remains unanswered for me is in Hilda's explanation much later on when we really pursued this in detail, and Philip and I worked on quite recently, is that in the new moon phase, it's a really bad time to go hunting during the day, right, over these 2 or 3 days when there's no moon. So you can't, it's a very difficult time to catch anything. And we all know the moon has a huge impact on the earth and nature, but I've yet have questions. Well, I don't quite understand how that is explained in Western science. So another interesting thing there. But no doubt it's got something to do with the creation time as well in Kaytetye ways of talking about the moon. So I'm going to actually now refer to a book by Harold Koch of, thank you, the late Mr. Thompson, whose stories feature in this book, and in particular one about the moon ancestor. And as in many parts of Australia, the moon ancestor is male and the sun is female, and the moon is associated with the west and the sun the east. And perhaps thinking about what we've just considered, this may reflect the direction from which they travel, which is something encountered in the ethnographic literature about, discussions of these Earth, the sun and the moon. So I'll just go on to talk about how the story by Mr. Thompson has been used in the school language program, and the Kaytetye language program at Neutral Junction School, in collaboration with Music Outback, produced a number of songs, and local artists and Kaytetye people at the school have done various drawings to illustrate the song and create songbooks. So this is one based on the story, The Moon is an Old Man. And in creating this book, the school, with Music Outback and myself, visited the site that the moon is frequented. It's called Moon Rock Hole. It's a really popular place to go hunting and go for day trips. And so I'll just talk a little bit about this whole process of creating the story. So this was the book, the 1994 book. And you can see in the story, there's some numbers which refer to sentences. And I'm just going to show you how we've, went through this story and selected key sentences to make up verses and a chorus. So here I'm just showing you the first chorus, which is about that site, Moon Rock Hole. You can see that we've taken directly from the text there from the 1994 story. We've made it simpler in a number of ways to deem appropriate for a primary school context. So we made the tense the same, so all the verbs end in the n ending, and in the songbook you can see that. Changed it to the third person, so the children are singing about the moon ancestor, not the first person. And also the Kaytetye women said they're very happy to keep the associated motion tense. Harold, you'll be pleased to know, because they don't see that as complicated at all. So, all those verbs, it's all that, those forms of the verb, like artianalpen in the book, to go back and chop, referring here to sugar bag. So yeah, but certain things associated with older language, like that RE suffix on the past tense, they didn't want that, because that's trying to appeal to the younger generations and what children do learn. So it's interesting. One can assume people are still quite, children are still quite okay doing the associated motion conjugations. So here's a translation of the whole song. And the books, this was the first of quite a number of songbooks that were created from an elder story, and these have all been put in the Living Archive of Australian Languages, which Jane was instrumental in setting up. You can see Rachel Numbler's drawings on the screen here. So as well as being a springboard for language learning and a springboard for lessons on the sky and science, the song is intensely local, reflecting the places that Kaytetye people frequent and the associated creation story, as well as basic rules in society. And reworking a traditional story into song also reiterates the importance of elders and their knowledge, while at the same time making this knowledge contemporary. Maybe this is similar to the modern day versions of Shakespeare, right? So keeping this into a contemporary context. As a song, it resonates long after the lesson, and the music is unique to this song alone. The school teacher, a past school teacher, Rose McKerrison, once told me she knew when the children were most happy on the excursions as they sang the Kaytetye songs, as opposed to the English songs that they also wrote in these workshops. I'll just show you, if I've got time, I'll play the song.
5 minutes remaining.
Okay, I'll just go, before I come back to the song, I'll just show you another picture of that place. It's of many stories and people, Kaytetye people in the school using it. And I want to sum up, refer to a quote by Jane from this article in the 1997 book. Teachers, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, need to have a good understanding of the Aboriginal views of meteorology and how it relates to Western views of meteorology. Otherwise, the teaching of meteorology in schools is liable to be grossly inadequate. Non-Aboriginal teachers may continue to present inappropriate information, for example, by defining seasons as summer, winter, autumn, spring, to children whose parents have a much better knowledge of the weather of the region. And you can just imagine, should I have been in the classroom and corrected everyone about the direction the moon travels? So I really want to reiterate the importance of this chapter by Jane and its benefits, its relevance to education. So shall I play the song? Would everyone like to hear the song? Philip and Valentine, would you like to hear the song too?
Yes, we would like to hear the song.
Okay, so you haven't got the Kaytetye there, but you've got the translation. Oops, sorry. And just a shout out to the Akalapata people online. I would just also like to reiterate what a generous and formidable person Jane Simpson has been to many linguists, and her footprint on Australian linguistics and linguists has been immense. And thank you very much for all your wise words and mentorship over the years.